This is Christina from The Upcoming. It's so lovely to speak with you today. To start things off, can you tell us what Happy End is about and what audiences can expect going in?
Happyend is I like to call it a friendship breakup film. It's a story about two protagonists, Yuta and Ko, who are high schoolers living in a near future Japan where a big earthquake is about to strike. And in this world, the government, which is like far right leaning government, is using the fear of the earthquake to try to amass as much power as possible using an emergency decree. With it comes a lot of xenophobia and racism. And Ko, who is a Zainichi Korean character, is an ethnically Korean kind of minority within Japan, begins to grow politically and gain a political conscience at the spurring of a classmate, Fumi. And so he starts to kind of spend more time with Fumi and spend less time with his best friend Yuta, who is also quite apolitical and just wants to have fun while things last in high school. And so it traces the kind of dissolution of the friendship between Yuta and Ko as they end the first or the last year of high school. So it's, in a way, it's almost like a love triangle romance, but about a friendship.
And what sparked the idea for this film?
There were multiple strands, of course. And on one hand, I think I was thinking a lot about the relationship of a friendship and how ambiguous that can be, that relationship. Different than a romance or a family member, or siblingship, I guess. Just friendship just doesn't have that many rules. It's not a kind of an ordained relationship by social structures in a way. So there's no like ritual that surrounds like becoming a friend or not becoming a friend. And on one hand, like you could have friendships that are on the surface, right? You could have friends that you just meet once a month for a beer at a pub. Whereas you could also have friends that are the foundations of your whole being that sometimes can be more important than a lover or even family members. And I certainly have had a lot of friendships like that one, like the latter. And they have influenced me greatly. And so I was really thinking about this relationship but at the same time, how those kinds of relationships can begin to crumble, especially through political difference. And I was also thinking a lot about the long arc of Japanese colonialism, its imperial past. And so, especially in the events that occurred in 1923, there was a big earthquake that struck the kind of Tokyo region, and it killed many people due to the earthquakes and fires. But at the same time, there were a lot of people who were massacred, a lot of Korean people who were massacred by normal Japanese people. And that came due to this colonial resentment that had been building up within the Japanese public, racism, xenophobia, and I've been witnessing that has kind of basically always been there, but resurfacing in a big way these days, and a lot of how these social institutions that still exist within Japan were just carryovers from that period, and so thinking a lot about that, and I sort of merged those two together into one film.
On the subject of Ko's treatment as a Korean student, what conversations do you hope that this portrayal opens up in the real world?
I think the emotion that I was most interested in portraying about Ko was this feeling that the closer you are to a friend who you thought would be there and would have your back, the closer you are to friends like that, the bigger the betrayal is and stronger the anger is when you realize that they won't fight with you in moments that really matter to them. I think um, that being said, I think in the film, Ko still has yet to learn enough to be able to articulate exactly the reasons and feelings that he's having in a way that his friends understand. And so, I really do hope it sparks conversation about like conversation, but also this feeling that's extremely justified of anger especially at those who were your friends or are your friends when they don't show up. And so, yeah, in many instances, I have Chinese Korean friends who have told me that they're less angry almost at the kind of people that do spute hatred or racism, and actually they become more angry at those who they considered their friends who like didn't stand behind them or stand with them in those moments. And so that is it's a delicate feeling, and I think that's it's one that applies everywhere. And the fact that I said it in the near future, I was hoping to spark some imagination about where Japan is headed. And I think when you look at where Japanese society is at now, unfortunately, it's headed exactly, I feel like, where the film is going as well. So I hope that the film can do something a little bit about that.
On the subject of the future, what makes speculative fiction the right medium for exploring today's political anxieties?
I think it gives a little bit of a critical distance towards the things that are presented in the film that relate to what's happening today. That kind of an arm's length is a good distance to kind of see a bigger picture of what may be happening today. At the same time, I think speculative fiction is, in general, is quite interesting because it, I feel like, functions to spark the imagination of what could be and what can be possible in a way that I don't know if any other medium can. And I think what's really important, especially today, is imagination. Imagine what could be different, and imagining what today's world where everything just kind of feels like things can never change.
And underground music and its spaces play a pretty important role in Happyend. What makes this underground culture such a powerful force of connection for resistance, especially for the young people in the film?
Well, in the film, I was portraying a world in which these spaces are banned and often do get banned. And in that kind of a world, I think to insist that it's still important and try to create spaces like that is actually quite important. And especially, I portray Yuta as a non or like a political character, but to be honest, he is quite a political character too, in that he ignores these rules and laws, and in a way, through direct action, tries to set these spaces up on his own, and that can be quite powerful as well. And I think instinctively, this character Yuta understands the power of just being together in a place, like assembling in a space with a group of people, and actually assembling in a space together with a group of people who feel similarly is maybe the most powerful political act imaginable, whether that's in a space or on the street. And so, in that sense, these club spaces or underground spaces is quite important. But in terms of music, in the film, I definitely have a dichotomy in a way between like the characters who go towards politics and the characters who sort of escape into the world of music. But to be honest, it's never that split, right? The two can work in harmony together. And so, every music genre, but especially the music genre techno that's portrayed in the film is quite a political genre as well. It has political history. I was hoping to imbue a little bit of that in the film.
And how did you want to portray the techno scene in Japan in your film?
I mean, I don't know how faithful I was to the actual techno scene in Japan, but we were able to work with Yukimatsu Yosuke, who is one of my favorite DJs of all time. And I think he's probably, at this point, maybe the best known techno DJ in Japan. So it was more to try to portray him rather than like a techno scene in general. But the techno scene is quite vibrant in Japan, and it feels, whenever you go, it feels quite utopic.
And how did you approach casting the actors for Ko and Yuta? What qualities were you looking for specifically in them?
We cast a really wide net when we were casting. We include, looking at people who had professional experience in acting and non-professional actual high schoolers and this that, but what was most important was to find people who already had the kind of personality traits, characteristics that the characters that I had written already had. And we happened to encounter these people that felt like they embodied the characters perfectly. And the other thing that was important was the chemistry between them. And so, the most important thing was to make, especially the main friend group, feel as if they had been friends since childhood. And so, no matter how much workshopping you do and how good of an actor you are, I think you can still kind of pick up on good chemistry or who just don't work well together. And we just managed to find 5 friends who actually became friends. And to the degree that the main 2 protagonists, the actors who play them, actually became roommates afterwards because they became his best friends. No, we were really lucky with the casting.
Which character was the most difficult to cast?
I'd say the most difficult to cast was Ming's character because her character was specifically a Taiwanese person living in Japan or was born and raised in Japan who could speak her native tongue a little bit, but is beginning to lose it. And first of all, we just like couldn't really find actors with this kind of background who were Taiwanese living in Japan, and nobody came to audition, and especially those with like the right kind of language level was quite important. Was quite important to find. But then we through a friend of mine, Lulu, suggested Sheena, who was living in New York at the time. And she just had exactly the same kind of thoughts and complexes and identity and life story as the character that I had written. And so, again, kind of a miraculous encounter.
What types of portrayals of foreigners in Japan did you avoid in your film?
Well, the thing is, I didn't want to call too much attention to it. I think what was really important is to portray people who, like, in the kind of social imaginary of what Japan's supposed to look like, portray people who like didn't necessarily fit into that mold. Yet, when you go to Japan and when you see actual like classrooms full of students, like you see Japanese kids who are Black and Japanese kids who are Brazilian or who have Chinese or Korean background. And to me, what was most important is to portray. Well, what I really was trying to do is to question what Japaneseness even is. I never thought that it existed as an identity. I mean, it's a fiction that's kind of was used, I think, to unify the nation state of Japan more than an identity that is grounded in anything but that narrative. I thought that portraying these Japanese kids, which included kids who like don't fit the stereotype of what's considered Japanese looking, would begin to kind of chip away at that.
Now that your film is out, what is the most interesting or memorable piece of feedback you've received on it?
The comment that made me most happy was when the film screened in Korea. Korea recently experienced a wave of popular protests against their president, Yoon. Did exactly the same thing that the prime minister in our film did, which was use an emergency decree to try to amass power by stoking the fears of, I guess, North Korea. The Korean population stopped it and brought him down, which was really inspiring to see. And an audience member who saw the film in Korea wrote that when they were kind of protesting, sitting in at the presidential palace, I guess, the Diet Korea in this past December or January, people actually brought her kimbap as she was doing the sit-in. And so when she saw that scene in the film where that something like that happens, she couldn't hold back the tears. And so that made me really happy to know that something like that actually happened, and also that that resonated so strongly with her.